What happens when a forced marriage to a ruthless crime lord becomes something neither of you expected? Isabella Moretti walked into a contract written in ice, but what she didn't know was that even the coldest hearts can burn. This is a story of power, fear, and the dangerous line between hate and love. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Sat. The champagne had gone flat an hour ago. Isabella sat alone at the edge of the massive bed, still wearing her wedding dress. White silk, hand-stitched lace, a train that cost more than most people earned in a year. It pooled around her feet like spilled milk. She'd stopped crying around midnight. Now she just stared at the door. Adrian hadn't come back. Their wedding had been beautiful in the way funerals sometimes are, expensive, formal, and utterly devoid of joy. Her father had gripped her arm too tightly as he walked her down the aisle, his smile sharp with warning. The Moretti family needed this alliance. The Volkov Empire demanded it. And Isabella? She was simply the currency that made it all possible. She'd known Adrian Volkov by reputation long before she knew his face. Chicago's most feared enforcer. A man who'd built an empire on blood and silence. They said he didn't feel anything, that something essential had been carved out of him years ago, leaving only ice and edges. But she'd hoped. Even knowing what he was, she'd hoped. The ceremony had been quick. Adrian's vows had sounded like a business presentation. His kiss, their first and only, had lasted exactly 2 seconds, his lips cold and clinical against hers. No lingering, no softness, just obligation, checked off a list. The reception had been worse. He'd sat beside her at the head table, never once reaching for her hand. While her father and his associates drank and laughed and made crude jokes about wedding nights, Adrian had remained perfectly still, his expression carved from marble. When she'd tried to speak to him, asking something simple about the food, he'd looked at her with eyes the color of winter storms and said nothing at all. And then, an hour ago, he'd brought her here. To his home. Their home, she supposed, though the word felt like a lie in her mouth. "I have rules," he'd said. They were the first real words he'd spoken directly to her since "I do." She'd turned to face him, hope still flickering stupidly in her chest. "Rules? You'll have your own room, down the hall, third door on the right." His voice was flat, uninflected. He might have been giving directions to a stranger. "You're free to move about the house, but the east wing is off limits. My office, my private spaces, you don't enter them." Isabella had felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Adrian, we're married now. In name only." He'd cut her off without raising his voice. "This marriage is a strategic alliance. Nothing more. You're here because our families require it. That doesn't mean we need to pretend this is something it isn't. What about—" She'd hesitated, hating how small her voice sounded. "What about us?" The look he'd given her then would haunt her for months. Not cruel, exactly. Worse than cruel. Empty. "There is no us, Isabella. There's a contract and a convenient arrangement. You'll be provided for. You'll want for nothing material. In exchange, you'll play your part in public and stay out of my way in private." He'd paused at the door, his back to her. "Don't expect affection. Don't expect intimacy. And don't make the mistake of expecting this to become something it can never be." Then he'd left. That had been an hour ago, maybe 2. Time felt broken. Isabella finally stood, her legs stiff from sitting. The dress suddenly felt like a cage, all those buttons running down her spine that she couldn't reach. She struggled with them for a minute before giving up, leaving them half undone. She didn't care anymore. The room he'd mentioned was exactly where he said it would be. Third door on the right, down a hallway so long and empty it echoed with her footsteps. The room itself was beautiful. Of course it was. Everything in this house was beautiful. High ceilings, antique furniture, windows that looked out over the lake, a prison cell with a view. Her bags were already there, unpacked by staff she'd never met. Someone had hung her clothes in the closet, arranged her books on the shelf, placed her mother's photograph on the nightstand. The small intimacies of the gesture made her want to cry again. She didn't. Instead, she peeled off the wedding dress, left it in a heap on the floor, and crawled into bed wearing nothing but her slip. The sheets were cold. Everything here was cold. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow, she'd figure out how to survive this. Tonight, she just needed to stop feeling. Sleep didn't come. Hmm. The days that followed established a pattern that would define the next 6 months of Isabella's life. She woke alone, ate breakfast alone in a dining room built for 20, spent her days wandering through a house so large she kept discovering new rooms. Adrian was a ghost, present only in the evidence of his existence. A coffee cup in the sink, a door left slightly ajar, the smell of his cologne lingering in the hallway. When they did cross paths, it was worse than his absence. "Good morning," she'd tried once, encountering him in the kitchen at dawn. He'd been dressed already, a three-piece suit that probably cost more than her childhood home. Phone in one hand, coffee in the other. He'd looked at her like she was furniture. No response, just a blank, assessing stare before he walked past her and out the door. She'd stopped trying after that. Public appearances were a different kind of torture. Twice a month, sometimes more, they'd attend events together. Fundraisers, business dinners, gallery openings. Adrian would pick her up in the town car, and for those few hours, he'd transform. His hand would find the small of her back. He'd lean in when she spoke, as if her words were precious. He'd smile. Not at her, never at her, but for the cameras. For the crowds who whispered about Chicago's most powerful couple. "You're doing well," he'd told her once, in the car ride home from a particularly grueling charity gala. She'd spent 3 hours smiling until her face hurt, making small talk with people who looked at her with either pity or envy. Doing well? She'd been too exhausted to keep the bitterness from her voice. At what, exactly? Playing your part. He'd glanced at her then, something unreadable flickering across his face. It's all that's required. She'd wanted to scream, to grab him by his perfect lapels and shake him until something human fell out. Instead, she'd turned to look out the window at the city lights bleeding past. "I'm so glad I meet your expectations," she'd said quietly. He hadn't responded. Of course he hadn't. The only person she spoke to regularly was Marie, the housekeeper. A woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a discretion that probably came from years of working for men like Adrian. "Has he always been like this?" Isabella had asked one morning, about 2 months in. Marie had been arranging flowers in the foyer, white lilies, always white lilies, and Isabella had been desperate enough for conversation to interrupt. Marie had paused, her weathered hands gentle on the stems. "Mr. Volkov is complicated. That's a diplomatic way of saying he's heartless." "No." Marie's response had been surprisingly firm. "He has a heart. He's just forgotten where he put it." Isabella had wanted to ask more, but Adrian had appeared at the top of the stairs and Marie had vanished like smoke. That was how things worked here. Everyone disappeared when he arrived. The loneliness was a physical thing. It lived in her chest, grew heavier each day. She tried to fill the hours. She read every book in the library. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since college. She took long walks along the lake, watching the water change with the seasons. Nothing helped. She'd married a ghost, and she was haunting her own life. 3 months in, her father called. "How are you settling in?" Such a careful question. So much underneath it. "Fine." Isabella kept her voice neutral. She'd learned that much, at least. Never let them hear you break. "Everything's fine." "And Adrian? He's treating you well?" Treating her well. What a question. He didn't treat her at all. She was wallpaper to him, background noise. "He's adequate." Her father had laughed, actually laughed. "Good. That's good, Isabella. You're doing what's needed. The alliance is holding. Business is stable. You've made your family proud." She'd hung up shortly after, then spent an hour in the shower trying to wash off the feeling of being a transaction. It didn't work. 4 months in, she started having nightmares. Always the same one. She was in the wedding dress again, but it was growing, expanding, wrapping around her like a shroud. She'd wake up gasping, reaching for someone who was never there. One night, the dream was so vivid, she woke up screaming. The house absorbed the sound, gave nothing back. She sat in the darkness, heart pounding, waiting for something. Footsteps, maybe. A knock on the door. Some sign that someone had heard, that someone cared. Nothing came. She went back to sleep alone. The change, when it came, was so unexpected that Isabella almost missed it. It started with a cough. Nothing serious, just a scratch in her throat that wouldn't go away. She ignored it, because she ignored most things about herself these days. Her needs had become background static, hardly worth acknowledging. But the cough got worse. By the end of the week, she had a fever. By the weekend, she could barely get out of bed. Marie found her on a Sunday morning, still in yesterday's clothes, shivering despite the 3 blankets. Mrs. Volkov, Marie's voice cracked with worry. How long have you been like this? I don't know. Few days, maybe. Her own voice sounded strange, distant. I'm fine. Just tired. You're burning up. Marie's cool hand on her forehead felt like heaven. I'm calling Mr. Volkov. No. Isabella tried to sit up and failed. Don't. He doesn't want to be bothered. But Marie was already gone. Isabella drifted in and out of consciousness. Time became fluid, unreliable. She was aware of voices, movement, hands touching her with unexpected gentleness. At one point, she felt herself being lifted, carried. The scent of expensive cologne wrapped around her, cedar and something darker, more complex. Adrian. Her eyes wouldn't open properly. Everything was fever-bright and strange. But she felt him, the solid reality of his arms around her, the steady rhythm of his breathing. It's just the flu, she mumbled, or tried to. The words came out wrong. I'm okay. You're not okay. His voice so close to her ear. Was she imagining the rough edge of concern? Why didn't you say something? You don't want to be bothered. She felt his arms tighten fractionally. Or maybe she imagined that too. The fever made everything unreliable. Close your eyes, he said. Not cold this time. Something else. Something almost kind. I've got you. So she did. When she woke up again, she was in a different room. Not her bedroom. His. She recognized it from the one time she'd glimpsed inside months ago. Dark furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, everything precise and minimal. And there, in the chair beside the bed, sat Adrian. He'd taken off his jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie gone. He looked rumpled, which was so foreign on him that for a moment she thought she was still dreaming. You're awake. He stood immediately, moving to the bedside. His hand went to her forehead, checking her temperature with an efficiency that suggested he'd been doing it regularly. Fever's down. That's good. Isabella stared at him. This close, she could see details she'd never noticed before. The faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the shadow of exhaustion under his eyes, the way his jaw tensed when he was worried. He was worried. About her. How long? Her throat was raw. 2 days. The doctor's been here 3 times. He reached for the water glass on the nightstand, held it to her lips with unexpected gentleness. Drink. She did, because she didn't have the strength to argue. The water was cool, perfect. His hand supporting the back of her head was warm. You should have told someone you were sick, he said, taking the glass away once she'd finished. Marie said you'd been coughing for over a week. I didn't think anyone would care. The words hung between them, sharp and honest and completely unplanned. Isabella watched something flicker across Adrian's face. Surprise, maybe. Or pain. It was gone before she could name it. Someone would have cared, he said quietly. Who? The fever made her brave, reckless. You? You've barely spoken to me in 4 months. You made it very clear I'm nothing but a contractual obligation. Isabella, no. She tried to sit up, failed, fell back against the pillows. You don't get to do this. You don't get to ignore me for months and then suddenly play concerned husband because I got sick. I'm not playing. His voice was sharp now, defensive. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to care? The admission hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying. Isabella's breath caught. What? But Adrian was already pulling back, literally and figuratively. She could see it happen, watch the walls slam back into place. His expression smoothed out, became that familiar blank mask. He stood, putting distance between them. You need rest. I'll have Marie bring up soup. His voice was controlled again, careful. Back to the stranger she'd married. The doctor said you should be better in a few days. Adrian, rest, Isabella. He left. She stared at the closed door for a long time, her heart doing something complicated and painful in her chest. He'd said it. He'd actually said it. You think I wanted to care? Which meant he did. Despite everything, despite the walls and the distance and the careful cruelty, he cared. And he was terrified of it. Yet, Adrian didn't come back. Over the next few days, as her strength returned, Isabella saw him exactly once, a glimpse of him in the hallway, moving past her open door without looking in. Marie became her primary caretaker again, bringing meals and medicine and carefully neutral conversation. But things had changed. Small things, barely noticeable if you weren't paying attention. Fresh flowers appeared in her room every morning. Her favorite tea showed up on the breakfast tray without her having to ask for it. The book she'd been reading, which she'd left in the library, was now on her nightstand. Someone was paying attention. Someone cared about the details of her life. It took her 3 days to be well enough to leave the bedroom. When she did, she went looking for him. She found Adrian in his office, the place he'd explicitly told her never to enter. She didn't care. She knocked once and walked in without waiting for permission. He looked up from his desk, surprise flashing across his face before he could hide it. "Isabella, you should be resting. Why did you take care of me?" she interrupted. "You were sick. It was necessary." That's not an answer. She crossed her arms, staying in the doorway because if she got too close, she might lose her nerve. "You could have had Marie do it. The doctor. Anyone. Why you?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you want me to say. The truth. For once, just tell me the truth." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Really looked, the way he hadn't since their wedding night. Isabella felt exposed under that gaze, vulnerable, but she didn't look away. "You're my wife," he finally said. "I thought I was a contractual obligation." "You are." But there was something in his voice, a crack in the ice. "That doesn't mean—" He stopped, stood abruptly, turned to face the window. "This conversation is pointless." "Is it?" Isabella took a step into the room, then another. "Because you sat by my bed for 2 days. Marie told me. You didn't sleep. You checked my fever every hour. You—" "Stop." "Why?" "Because it's true? Because you actually felt something for 5 minutes, and now you're terrified. I said stop." He spun to face her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. Anger, yes, but underneath it, fear, pure, undiluted fear. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." She was close enough to touch him now, but she kept her hands at her sides. "Help me understand." "Understand what? That I'm broken? That I can't give you what you want?" His laugh was bitter. "I told you from the beginning what this was. You're the one who keeps trying to make it into something else. I'm trying to make it into a marriage. Marriage is a piece of paper. That's all it is. That's all it can ever be. You don't believe that." Isabella watched his face, saw the lie written there. "If you believed that, you wouldn't be this afraid." "I'm not afraid. You're terrified." She said it softly, not an accusation, but a fact. Something happened to you, something that made you think caring about someone is dangerous. But Adrian, whatever it was, don't. The word came out sharp, violent. Don't analyze me. Don't try to fix me. Don't make me into some damaged thing you can heal with patience and understanding. He was breathing hard now, hands clenched at his sides. "I am what I am. Accept it or don't, but stop pushing." The silence that followed felt alive, electric. Isabella could feel her heartbeat in her throat. "I can't accept it," she whispered. "I can't spend the rest of my life married to someone who won't even try." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or regret. "Then you're going to be disappointed." He walked past her, out of his own office, leaving her standing alone among his carefully ordered things. Isabella waited until she heard his footsteps fade before she let herself react. Not crying, she was done crying, but something harder, more determined. If Adrian Volkov thought he could keep her at arm's length forever, he was wrong. She'd seen the crack in his armor. She'd felt his hands shake when he checked her fever. She'd heard the truth in his voice when he said he didn't want to care. He could run, but she was tired of being left behind. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange kind of tension. Adrian avoided her more carefully than before, as if proximity itself was dangerous. But Isabella stopped making it easy for him. She started joining him for breakfast. Didn't ask permission, just showed up in the dining room at 7 a.m. and sat across from him with her coffee and toast. He never acknowledged her presence, but he stopped leaving immediately. After a week, he started staying for entire meals. She began using the library when she knew he'd be there, would curl up in the chair opposite his desk with a book, reading in comfortable silence while he worked. He never told her to leave. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her, his expression unreadable, small victories, tiny increments of progress. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the fever. Isabella had spent the afternoon painting, a new hobby she'd taken up to fill the empty hours. She was in the sunroom, covered in paint, working on a landscape of the lake, when Adrian appeared in the doorway. She didn't hear him at first. It wasn't until she stepped back to assess her work that she noticed him standing there, still in his suit, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Oh." She set down her brush, suddenly self-conscious. "I didn't hear you come in. You paint." Not a question, but not quite a statement either. "I used to, before." Before the marriage, she meant, before everything changed. "I started again recently." He moved closer, studying the canvas. "It's good." The compliment was so unexpected that Isabella didn't know how to respond. "Thank you." Adrian's gaze moved from the painting to her face. "You have paint on your cheek." "I usually do." She smiled slightly, reaching up to wipe it away. "Wait." He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. Of course he had a handkerchief, and stepped closer. "Let me." Time did something strange. Slowed, maybe. Stopped altogether. Isabella held perfectly still as Adrian raised his hand to her face, the white cloth gentle against her skin. He was so close she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, count the fine lines at their corners. "There," he said softly. But he didn't step back. Neither did she. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Isabella could feel her pulse in her throat, see the muscle jumping in Adrian's jaw. His hand was still raised, the handkerchief forgotten, his thumb now resting against her cheekbone. "Adrian," she whispered. His eyes dropped to her lips. She saw the exact moment the decision formed, watched him lean in, felt the ghost of his breath against her mouth. And then he jerked back like she'd burned him. "I can't." The words came out rough, almost panicked. "I can't do this." "Adrian, wait." But he was already gone, moving fast, putting rooms between them. Isabella heard a door slam somewhere in the house, the sound echoing through empty halls. She stood alone in the sunroom, paint-stained and shaking, her lips still parted for a kiss that never came. This time she did cry. Not from sadness, exactly. From frustration, yes. From loneliness, absolutely. But also from something that felt dangerously like hope, because he'd wanted to kiss her. She'd seen it in his eyes, felt it in the tension of his body. He'd wanted to, and only fear had stopped him. Fear could be fought. Fear could be overcome. For the first time in 4 months, Isabella let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this marriage could become something real. She just had to be patient enough to let Adrian reach the same conclusion, and brave enough to keep pushing until he did. The next morning, Adrian was gone before dawn. Isabella knew because she'd barely slept, listening for sounds of him moving through the house. By the time she dragged herself downstairs, Marie was already clearing away his breakfast dishes. "He had an early meeting," Marie offered without being asked, her tone carefully neutral. Isabella poured herself coffee, the bitter taste matching her mood. Of course he did. She spent the day trying not to replay the almost kiss in her mind. It didn't work. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt his thumb against her cheek, saw the war happening behind his eyes. Want versus fear. Need versus self-preservation. Fear had won. It always did with him. By evening, she was furious. Not at Adrian exactly, though he certainly deserved it, but at the whole impossible situation. At herself for caring. At him for making her care and then running away. At the universe for trapping her in a marriage that felt like slow suffocation. She needed to get out of the house. The gallery opening was perfect timing. An invitation had arrived weeks ago, addressed to both of them. Adrian never attended these things unless absolutely necessary for appearances, which meant Isabella could go alone. She needed air, conversation, something that didn't smell like expensive cologne and broken promises. She dressed carefully. A black dress that hugged in all the right places, heels that made her legs look endless. If Adrian was going to avoid her, fine. But she'd be damned if she'd sit home waiting like some forgotten houseplant. The gallery was in River North, all exposed brick and pretentious lighting. Isabella recognized a few faces from previous events, society wives with practiced smiles, businessmen sizing up art like quarterly projections. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and tried to remember how to be a person instead of a ghost. Isabella Moretti. The voice came from behind her, warm and familiar. I almost didn't believe it when I saw you. She turned and for the first time in months felt genuine surprise. Marco? Marco Santini hadn't changed much since college. Still tall, still charming, still wearing that easy smile that had gotten him out of countless scrapes. They'd been close once, before life and family obligations had pulled them in different directions. It's Volkov now, actually, she said, holding up her left hand with its obscenely large diamond. His eyebrows rose. Right, I heard about that. The wedding of the century or something equally dramatic. He moved closer, lowering his voice. How are you really? The question was so direct, so genuinely concerned, that Isabella felt something crack in her chest. She stopped, reconsidered. I'm at a gallery opening on a Thursday night, drinking mediocre champagne and pretending to understand modern art. So, living the dream. Marco laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so normal it made her want to cry. That bad. That complicated. She took a sip of her champagne, buying time. What about you? Last I heard, you were in New York. Moved back 6 months ago. Took over the family business, much to my eternal regret. He gestured toward a particularly aggressive abstract piece. Hence the gallery openings and mediocre champagne. Come on, let's at least look at the art while we suffer through this. They wandered through the gallery, falling into the easy rhythm of old friendship. Marco made her laugh, really laugh, with his commentary on the paintings. Pointed out the absurdity of a canvas that was literally just 3 red lines selling for $50,000. Asked her opinion on things and actually listened to her answers. It felt good. Normal. Like being human again instead of a carefully arranged ornament in someone's empty house. So tell me, Marco said as they stopped in front of a sculpture that looked like twisted metal having an identity crisis. Does your husband know you're out alone, making fun of overpriced art with strange men? You're not strange, and I don't need permission to leave the house. The words came out sharper than intended. Marco held up his hands. Hey, I wasn't implying. I just meant, from what I know about Adrian Volkov, he doesn't seem like the type to appreciate his wife wandering around unattended. Isabella's jaw tightened. My husband is many things, but possessive isn't one of them. Trust me. Something in her tone made Marco look at her more carefully. Isabella, it's fine. Really. She forced a smile. Tell me about New York. I want to hear everything. He let her change the subject, bless him. Spent the next hour regaling her with stories about his years in Manhattan, the disasters and triumphs and everything in between. Isabella soaked it up, grateful for the distraction, for the reminder that there was a world beyond the ice palace she lived in. She didn't notice the man watching them from across the gallery. Didn't see the phone call being made, the quiet conversation, the way information traveled through certain channels faster than light. By the time she and Marco were saying goodbye, exchanging numbers and promising to get coffee soon, the damage was already done. Thank you, Isabella said, meaning it. I needed this tonight more than you know. Anytime. Marco kissed her cheek, friendly and chaste. Don't be a stranger, okay? Chicago's more interesting with you in it. She floated home on a cloud of champagne and human contact, feeling more like herself than she had in months. Let herself into the house quietly, slipped off her heels in the foyer. The lights in the living room were on. Adrian sat in one of the leather chairs, still in his suit, a glass of scotch in his hand. The look on his face when he saw her made her stomach drop. Have fun? His voice was controlled. Too controlled. Isabella's brief happiness evaporated. I went to a gallery opening. Is that a crime now? Depends on what else you did there. He stood, set down his glass with deliberate care. Who was he? Excuse me? The man you were with, laughing, touching. Who was he? And there it was. That thin thread of something almost like emotion in his voice. Isabella would have found it funny if she weren't suddenly furious. A friend, from college. Not that it's any of your business. Not my business? Adrian moved closer, and she could see the tension in his shoulders, the muscle jumping in his jaw. You're my wife. Oh, now I'm your wife? The words exploded out of her. Now? After months of treating me like furniture? After running away every time we have an actual moment? Now you suddenly care who I spend time with? I care about appearances, about what people will think. Bullshit! Isabella threw her purse on the side table, not caring when it knocked over a decorative vase. This isn't about appearances. This is about control. About keeping me in a box while you pretend to feel nothing. I told you what this marriage was. You told me a lot of things. You also almost kissed me yesterday, then ran away like a coward. She saw him flinch, pressed her advantage. So which is it, Adrian? Am I a contractual obligation you don't care about, or am I your wife who's not allowed to have friends? You were more than friends. His voice dropped, dangerous and raw. I saw the photos, the way he looked at you, the way you looked at him. We were talking about art. You were happy. The accusation hung between them, sharp and telling. You were laughing. You never laugh like that here. Isabella stared at him, and suddenly she understood. This wasn't about jealousy, not really. It was about something deeper, more painful. He'd seen her happy, and it had destroyed him because he knew he wasn't the cause of it. No, she said quietly. I don't laugh like that here. Do you want to know why? Isabella, because here, I'm alone. I'm married to a man who won't talk to me, won't touch me, won't even look at me most days. I'm 26 years old and I feel like I'm disappearing. Her voice cracked. So yes, when an old friend treats me like an actual human being for 5 minutes, I laugh. I'm sorry if that offends you. Adrian's hands clenched at his sides. I never asked you to disappear. You did, though. The first night, when you laid out your rules. No affection, no intimacy, no connection. What did you think would happen? That I'd just exist in suspended animation, waiting for you to decide I'm worth acknowledging? That's not... He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture uncharacteristically agitated. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Isabella took a step toward him, then another. Stop hiding. Stop running. Stop pretending you don't feel anything when I can see it in your eyes every time you look at me. You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking you to try. That's all. Just try to let me in. Adrian's expression was pure agony. I can't. Can't or won't? Both, neither. I don't know. He turned away from her, his shoulders rigid. Every time I get close to you, He stopped, started again. Something breaks inside me. Something I've spent years building, and I can't afford to break, Isabella. Not for anyone. The vulnerability in his voice nearly undid her. Why? What are you so afraid of? For a long moment he said nothing, then so quietly she almost missed it. Losing you. Isabella's breath caught. Adrian. Don't. He held up a hand, still not facing her. Don't make this into something it's not. I'm telling you the truth because you asked for it, but it doesn't change anything. How can it not change anything? Because I'm still the same person, still broken in the same ways. He finally turned, and the look in his eyes was devastating. I watched my mother die when I was 8 years old, watched my father fall apart, drink himself into an early grave because he couldn't survive losing her. I learned early that love is just another word for eventual destruction. Isabella felt tears burn her eyes. Adrian, I swore I'd never let that happen to me, never care enough to break like that. And I haven't, not in 27 years. I built walls, Isabella, good ones, strong ones that kept me safe. His laugh was bitter. And then you showed up with your paint-stained hands and your impossible hope, and those walls started cracking. So yes, I ran away yesterday. I'll probably run away tomorrow too. Because the alternative is letting you all the way in, and I can't... His voice broke. I can't survive losing someone again. I won't. The silence that followed was absolute. Isabella felt like she was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying, watching Adrian bleed out truths he'd probably never spoken aloud before. You won't lose me, she whispered. You can't promise that. Neither can anyone. That's what makes it brave. Adrian shook his head, already retreating. I'm not brave. I'm just smart enough to know my limits. So what? We just stay like this forever? Strangers living in the same house, pretending we don't feel anything? If that's what it takes? To what? Stay safe? Isabella felt her own anger rising again, hot and desperate. You're not safe, Adrian. You're just alone. There's a difference. Maybe I prefer alone. Liar! She closed the distance between them, refusing to let him back away this time. If you preferred alone, you wouldn't have stayed by my bedside for 2 days. You wouldn't check to make sure my favorite tea is stocked. You wouldn't look at me the way you're looking at me right now, like I'm something precious and terrifying at the same time. Isabella, stop. No. You told me your truth, now I'm telling you mine. She was close enough to touch him now, close enough to see the war in his eyes. I didn't want this marriage either. I didn't want to be sold off like property to secure some alliance I barely understand. But I'm here, and so are you, and we can either make each other miserable for the rest of our lives, or we can try. Try what? Being honest? Being a present? Being something other than this? She gestured between them. This careful dance of avoidance. And if I can't give you what you need, then at least we'll know we tried. Adrian stared at her, breathing hard, looking like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. Isabella held her ground, held his gaze, refused to make this easy for him. I don't know how, he finally said, the admission raw and difficult. How to what? Be what you want. Be a husband instead of just... He struggled for words. Instead of this. Isabella felt something soften in her chest. Start small. Have breakfast with me. Real conversation, not just silence. Tell me about your day. Ask about mine. We don't have to solve everything tonight. And the friend? Marco? Is a friend. Nothing more. She watched his jaw tighten, understood what he needed to hear. But if it bothers you, I won't see him alone. Not because you're forbidding it, but because I choose not to. Because I'd rather spend that energy on this, on us. There is no us. There could be. The silence stretched between them, fragile and electric. Isabella could see Adrian fighting himself, see every instinct screaming at him to retreat, to rebuild the walls, to go back to the safety of nothing. One breakfast, he finally said. What? Tomorrow. We'll have breakfast together. He swallowed hard. I'll try. It was such a small concession, barely anything at all. But the way he said it, like he was offering up something vital and precious, made it feel enormous. Okay, Isabella said softly. One breakfast. Adrian nodded once, sharp and decisive, already regretting the promise. I need to... He gestured vaguely toward the stairs. I have work. It was a retreat, but a partial one. Isabella let him go, watched him walk away with slightly less distance than before. Progress. Tiny, fragile, terrifying progress. She spent the rest of the night in her room, unable to sleep, replaying every word of their argument. The way his voice had cracked when he talked about his mother. The fear in his eyes when he admitted to caring. The impossible weight of his pain, carried alone for so long he'd forgotten how to share it. Morning came too quickly and too slowly at the same time. Isabella dressed carefully, trying not to seem like she was trying. Found Adrian already in the dining room at 7 sharp, coffee poured, newspaper spread before him like a shield. Good morning, she said, her voice only slightly uncertain. He looked up, and for just a second she saw panic flash across his face. Then it smoothed out, replaced by something that might have been determination. Morning. He gestured to the chair across from him. Coffee? Please. They sat in silence for a minute, 2 minutes. Isabella sipped her coffee and tried not to stare. Adrian read the same paragraph 4 times without absorbing a word. This is awkward, he finally said. The blunt honesty surprised a laugh out of her. Extremely. He folded the newspaper, set it aside. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. Maybe that's okay. How is that okay? Because we're figuring it out together, instead of separately. Isabella took a breath. Tell me something about yourself, something I don't know. Adrian looked at her like she'd asked him to solve quantum physics. Like what? I don't know. Anything. What's your favorite color? What did you want to be when you grew up? What's the worst job you ever had? Those are 3 questions. Pick one. He thought about it for so long she figured he'd refuse entirely. Then, blue. Blue? My favorite color, like the lake at dawn, before the sun really comes up. That specific shade of almost gray, almost blue. Isabella felt something warm bloom in her chest. It was such a small detail, meaningless in the grand scheme of things, but he'd answered. He was trying. Mine's green, she offered. Forest green, like the trees in my hometown. Where are you from originally? A small town in upstate New York, near the Adirondacks. She smiled at the memory. Population 3,000 on a good day. Everyone knew everyone. It drove me crazy as a teenager. You miss it. Not a question, an observation. Isabella nodded. Sometimes, the quiet, the space. Chicago feels like a different planet. It is a different planet. Adrian picked up his coffee, set it down without drinking. I've lived here my whole life. Can't imagine anywhere else. Tell me about growing up here. The shutters came down immediately. Isabella. Nothing heavy. Just, where did you go to school? Did you have friends? What did you do for fun? She kept her voice light, unthreatening. I'm just trying to know you. Adrian's jaw worked. She could see him weighing every word, calculating risk. Finally, private school on the north side, I didn't have many friends, and fun wasn't really... He stopped. My father believed in discipline, structure, preparing for the family business. The way he said family business carried weight, dark, complicated weight that Isabella decided not to push on. Not yet. What about your mother? Before... She caught herself. What was she like? Pain flickered across his face, raw and immediate. For a moment she thought he'd shut down completely. Then, quietly, she was kind. Too kind for the life she married into. She used to read to me at night, insisted on it even when my father said it was making me soft. His thumb traced the rim of his coffee cup, the gesture unconscious. She read poetry. Whitman, mostly. I hated it then. Thought it was boring. And now? Now I have her entire collection in my office. I've never opened them. The admission hung between them, heavy with grief. Isabella wanted to reach across the table, take his hand, offer comfort. But she knew it was too much, too soon. So instead she just said, maybe someday you will. Maybe. They lapsed into silence again, but it felt different this time. Less oppressive. More like two people learning how to exist in the same space without armor. Your turn, Adrian said abruptly. My turn what? To tell me something. Something I don't know. Isabella blinked in surprise. He was engaging. Actually, engaging. Okay. I wanted to be a painter when I was younger, like professionally. I was good enough, or at least my teachers thought so. Got into a decent art program, the whole thing. What happened? Life. Family obligations. My father had other plans. She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice, failed. The Morettis don't produce artists. We produce advantageous marriages and business connections. You resent him for it. Sometimes. Other times I understand. He was doing what he thought was best. She met Adrian's eyes. Doesn't mean it didn't hurt. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe. Recognition of shared pain. If you could go back, I'd probably make the same choices, just with less hope about how they'd turn out. The honesty of it seemed to surprise him. You don't hope anymore? I'm learning to hope differently. Smaller. Safer. She smiled slightly. Or at least I was, until last night, when I apparently decided to hope for impossible things again. Isabella, it's okay. You don't have to say anything. She stood, carried her plate to the sideboard. Thank you for breakfast, for trying. It means more than you probably realize. She left before he could respond, before the moment could break into something neither of them was ready for. Behind her, she heard Adrian let out a long, shaky breath. In the doorway, Marie caught her eye and smiled. Just a little, just enough. The next morning, Adrian was at the table again. And the morning after that. Each breakfast became fractionally easier, the silences less painful, the conversations marginally deeper. He told her about a deal that had fallen through, and she told him about the painting she was working on. He asked about her family, and she asked about his work. They were learning each other. Slowly, carefully, like people diffusing a bomb. A week into their new routine, Adrian did something that shocked her. He asked if she wanted to join him for dinner. Not at home, where Marie could serve as a buffer. Out. At a restaurant. Just the two of them. Like a date? Isabella tried to keep her voice neutral. Like, he struggled with the word. Like two people who are married having dinner. I don't know what to call it. A date works. Fine. A date. He looked pained by the admission. There's a place in West Loop, Italian. I thought you might... He stopped, started again. You mentioned missing good Italian food. She had mentioned that 3 days ago, in passing, during breakfast. He'd remembered. I'd like that, she said, and meant it. The restaurant was small, intimate, the kind of place that required reservations months in advance. Adrian had clearly pulled strings to get them in. They sat across from each other at a corner table, candles flickering between them, and for the first time since their wedding, Isabella felt like they were actually on the same side. Tell me something you've never told anyone, Adrian said halfway through the meal, the wine making him brave. That's a dangerous question. I know. Isabella considered him over the rim of her glass, decided to risk it. Sometimes I imagine what my life would have been like if I'd said no. If I'd refused the marriage, run away, chosen art over duty. She set down her glass. I know it's pointless. The past is the past. But I can't help wondering. And what do you imagine? Poverty, probably. Disownment. But also freedom. My own choices. A tiny apartment full of paint and possibility. She smiled sadly. It's a nice fantasy. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, I think about that too. Different version, same idea. What if I'd walked away from the family business, become someone else? What would you have been? I don't know, something simpler, something that didn't require being... He gestured at himself. This. You're not just this, Adrian. You're more than what your father made you. Am I? His smile was bitter. I'm not sure anymore. I've been playing this part so long, I don't remember what's underneath. Then maybe it's time to find out. Their eyes met across the table, and Isabella saw something crack in his expression. Not breaking, exactly. Opening, like a door left slightly ajar, light spilling through. Adrian reached across the table, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand covered hers, warm and solid and real. I'm trying, he said quietly. I know it doesn't look like much, but I am. I know. Isabella turned her hand over, laced her fingers through his. I see you trying. They sat like that for a while, hands joined, the noise of the restaurant fading into background static. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to what a normal marriage should look like. But it was something. A beginning, fragile and new. When they got home that night, Adrian walked her to her door, stood there in the hallway, his hands in his pockets, looking like a teenager on a first date. Thank you for dinner, Isabella said. Thank you for coming. Another silence, this one charged with possibility. Isabella wondered if he'd try to kiss her, wondered if she wanted him to, wondered if they were ready. Good night, Isabella. He walked away, leaving her standing alone in the hallway. But this time it felt different, like a choice instead of a rejection, like patience instead of fear, progress. The dinners became a pattern. Twice a week, sometimes 3 times, Adrian would take Isabella out. Different restaurants, different neighborhoods, but always the same careful dance of 2 people learning how to be close without combusting. Isabella found herself looking forward to them with an intensity that scared her. She'd plan what to wear, what to say, rehearsing conversations in her head like lines from a script. It was pathetic, probably, getting dressed up for her own husband like he was some prize she hadn't yet won. But the alternative was going back to the silence, and she'd rather feel pathetic than feel nothing at all. 3 weeks into their new routine, Adrian surprised her by coming home early. Isabella was in the library, curled up in what had become her usual chair, when he appeared in the doorway still wearing his coat. You're home, she said, setting down her book. Meeting got canceled. He loosened his tie, and she noticed the tension in his shoulders. Mind if I join you? It's your library. That's not what I asked. Isabella gestured to the chair across from hers. Please. He sat, but the tension didn't leave. If anything, it got worse. He kept running his hand through his hair, A tell she'd learned meant he was working up to something. "What happened?" she finally asked. "Nothing, just—" He stopped, laughed without humor. "I ran into your friend today, Marco." Isabella's stomach dropped. "Adrian, he asked about you, how you were doing, if you were happy." Adrian's jaw tightened. He seemed genuinely concerned, like he actually cared about your well-being. He's a friend. Friends do that. "I know." The admission seemed to cost him. "That's not what bothers me." "Then what does?" "That he could ask that question, and I didn't have a good answer." Adrian finally looked at her, and the raw honesty in his eyes made her breath catch. "Are you happy?" Isabella didn't answer right away. It was too important a question to rush. "Happier than I was 2 months ago. Less happy than I could be." "That's diplomatic. That's honest." She closed her book, gave him her full attention. "You want me to say I'm miserable so you can feel justified in keeping your distance? Or you want me to say I'm perfectly content so you don't have to feel guilty, but it's not that simple?" "Nothing with you is simple. Nothing with us is simple." The correction was deliberate. "We're both trying to figure this out. Some days are better than others." Adrian stood abruptly, moved to the window. The lake was gray today, choppy with wind. "I told him you were fine, that we were fine. The lie came out so smoothly I almost believed it myself. Maybe it's not entirely a lie." "Isabella, we're having dinner together, talking. You came home early and sought me out instead of hiding in your office. That's something." "It's not enough." The words hung between them, heavy and complicated. Isabella stood, moved to join him at the window, close, but not touching. "What would be enough?" "I don't know, something more than this careful politeness, something that feels—" He struggled for the word. "Real. This is real. This is us pretending to be something we're not. What aren't we?" Adrian turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was devastating. "A couple. A real marriage. People who actually—" He stopped himself. "Who actually what?" "Nothing. Forget it." "No." Isabella stepped closer. "Say it. Whatever you were going to say, just say it. People who actually want each other." The words came out rough, almost angry. Not just tolerating each other's presence, not just making the best of a bad situation, actually wanting to be together. Isabella's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. "And you don't think we're there. I think I don't know what we are." His hand came up, almost touched her face, dropped. "I think every time I'm near you, something inside me breaks a little more. I think I'm terrified of what happens when it breaks completely." "Adrian, I almost kissed you 3 times this week." The confession burst out of him. "At dinner on Tuesday, when you laughed at something the waiter said. Yesterday morning, at breakfast, when you had that paint smudge on your neck. And just now, when you looked up from your book and smiled. 3 times, Isabella. And every time I stop myself because I'm—" He turned away. "Because I'm a coward." Isabella's breath caught. "You're not a coward." "Then what am I?" "Scared. There's a difference. Is there?" His laugh was bitter. "Feels the same from where I'm standing. Being scared doesn't make you a coward. Running from it forever would." Isabella moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. "But you're not running anymore, are you?" "I don't know what I'm doing." "Neither do I. Maybe that's okay." Adrian finally looked at her, really looked at her, and Isabella saw the war happening behind his eyes. The same war from the sunroom, from every almost moment between them. Want versus fear, need versus self-preservation. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly. "Do what?" "Want someone. Let myself want someone." His hand came up again, this time actually making contact. His palm cupped her cheek, thumb tracing her cheekbone with aching gentleness. "It feels like standing at the edge of a cliff." "Then don't look down." "Isabella, just—" She covered his hand with hers, holding it against her face. "Stop thinking. For once, just stop thinking and feel." She watched the exact moment the decision happened. Saw something shift in his eyes, saw his walls crack and crumble. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined. No practiced smoothness, no perfect movie moment. Adrian kissed her like a man drowning, desperate and clumsy and absolutely real. His other hand came up to frame her face, holding her like something precious and terrifying at the same time. Isabella's hands found his chest, felt his heart hammering against her palms. She kissed him back with months of loneliness and hope, and frustration poured everything she couldn't say into the pressure of her lips against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I'm still terrified," he whispered. "I know. This doesn't fix anything. I know that too. But He pulled back just enough to look at her. "I don't want to stop." "Then don't." He kissed her again, softer this time, less desperate, but somehow more devastating. Isabella felt something crack open in her chest, something warm and dangerous and utterly inevitable. When they finally separated, Adrian looked wrecked. He gestured vaguely toward the door. "I need to think." "Adrian, wait. Please." The word was ragged. I need a minute." He left, but this time the leaving felt different. Not like running, like regrouping, like a man who jumped off the cliff and was still figuring out if he was flying or falling. Isabella stood alone in the library, her lips still tingling, her heart doing complicated acrobatics in her chest. She wanted to chase after him, demand they talk this through, but she understood the need for space, for processing. They'd crossed a line. There was no going back from this. The question was whether Adrian would let them go forward. She didn't see him the rest of the day. He didn't come to dinner, didn't emerge from his office even when Marie knocked to offer food. Isabella ate alone, trying not to spiral, trying not to assume the worst. By bedtime, she'd convinced herself it had been a mistake. That tomorrow Adrian would be back to the ice, back to the distance, back to treating her like a stranger. The kiss had been an aberration, a moment of weakness he'd already regret. She was wrong. At midnight, there was a knock on her door, soft, almost hesitant. "Come in," she called, already knowing who it was. Adrian stood in the doorway, still dressed, but rumpled. He looked like he'd been running his hands through his hair for hours. "I can't sleep." "Neither can I." "Can we—" He gestured awkwardly. "Can we talk?" Isabella sat up, pulled her knees to her chest. "Of course." He came in but didn't sit, just paced near the foot of her bed like a caged animal. "I've been thinking about what you said, about being scared versus being a coward. And you're right. I am scared. I've been scared for so long I forgot what it felt like not to be." He stopped pacing, looked at her. "My father used to say that fear was just weakness in disguise, that real strength meant never letting anything touch you. Your father was wrong." "Was he?" Adrian's smile was sad. "He survived, built an empire, maintained control, never let anyone close enough to hurt him. Died alone and miserable, but he survived. That's not surviving, that's just not dying. There's a difference." "I'm starting to see that." He moved closer, sat on the edge of her bed, close enough to touch but not touching. "When I kissed you today, I felt something I haven't felt in years, maybe ever." "What?" "Hope. And it terrified me more than anything else." His hands clenched in his lap. "Because hope means there's something to lose. And I've spent my entire adult life making sure I had nothing to lose." Isabella reached out, covered his hands with hers. "You have me to lose now, whether you want to or not. That's what scares me. I know. But He turned his hands over, laced his fingers through hers. "I don't want to go back to before, to the silence and the distance and pretending you don't matter. Because you do matter, Isabella. You matter so much it makes me want to destroy something." She almost laughed at the phrasing. "That's probably the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. I'm not good at this." "Neither am I. We can be bad at it together." Adrian looked at their joined hands, then back up at her face. "What if I hurt you?" "You already have. We hurt each other. That's what happens when people try to be close." "That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. It's just true." Isabella squeezed his hands. "The question isn't whether we'll hurt each other. It's whether we'll stay anyway." "And will you?" "Stay? I'm already here. I've been here, waiting for you to catch up." Something in his expression cracked. "I'm sorry. for making you wait, for being, he gestured at himself, this mess of a person. I married you knowing you were a mess. I'm a mess too. We're a disaster together. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you feel less alone. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked her. He moved up the bed, lay down beside her on top of the covers. Not touching, just close. Present in a way he'd never been before. Tell me something, he said quietly, staring at the ceiling. Something real, not small talk, not safe. Something that matters. Isabella thought about it. I used to think I could save myself by being perfect, by never asking for too much, never complaining, never being difficult. I thought if I was good enough, quiet enough, patient enough, eventually someone would choose me. She turned her head to look at him. But you can't earn love by being small. I'm learning that now. Adrian's throat worked. You shouldn't have to earn it at all. Neither should you. He turned to face her, and in the dim light from the hallway, his eyes looked younger, more vulnerable. I don't know how to do this, how to let you in without losing myself in the process. You don't lose yourself, you just… She searched for the words. You make room for both of us. What if there's not enough room? What if I'm too broken, too damaged? Adrian, she reached out, touched his face. Everyone's broken. Everyone's damaged. That's not what makes you special. Then what does? You're trying, despite everything, despite the fear and the walls and all the reasons to give up. You're still trying. That's what matters. He closed his eyes, leaned into her touch. I kissed you today, and I wanted… He stopped, started again. I wanted things I've never let myself want before. And it felt like falling. Maybe that's what it's supposed to feel like. Maybe. He opened his eyes, and the look in them made her breath catch. Can I stay? Just for tonight. Just here. Isabella's heart stuttered. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She shifted over, making room. Adrian settled beside her, still on top of the covers, maintaining that last barrier of safety. But he was there, solid and real, and choosing to stay. They lay in silence for a while, the only sound their breathing gradually sinking. Isabella could feel the warmth of him, the tension slowly leaving his body. This doesn't mean, Adrian started. I know, one step at a time. I might still run tomorrow. Probably. But you came back tonight. That's something. His hand found hers in the darkness between them. Thank you for being patient, for not giving up. Thank you for coming back. They fell asleep like that, hands joined, everything else still uncertain. But it was a start, a real one. When Isabella woke up, pale dawn light filtering through the curtains, Adrian was gone. For a moment, panic seized her. He'd run again, couldn't handle the intimacy, back to square one. Then she saw the note on her nightstand, written in his precise handwriting. Had early meeting, didn't want to wake you, breakfast together? She held the note like it was something precious, reading it 3 times. Such a small thing, such a huge gesture. He'd stayed the night. He'd left a note. He wanted breakfast, progress. Isabella found him in the dining room an hour later, already on his second cup of coffee. He looked up when she entered, and something uncertain flickered across his face. Morning, he said. Good morning. She poured herself coffee, sat across from him. Thank you for the note. I didn't want you to think I'd… He stopped. That I was running. Were you? Thinking about it? Honestly? Yes. All morning. His smile was self-deprecating. But I didn't. That counts for something, right? It counts for a lot. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Adrian set down his fork, looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I want to try something, he said. Okay. I want to tell you about my mother. Really tell you, not just… He gestured vaguely. Not just the sanitized version. Isabella set down her own fork, gave him her full attention. I'm listening. Adrian took a breath, clearly steeling himself. She wasn't supposed to marry my father. She was from a good family, educated, had prospects. But she fell in love with him anyway, against everyone's advice. Thought she could change him, make him softer. Did she? For a while, maybe? I remember him being different when I was very young, laughing sometimes, gentle with her. His jaw tightened. But the business, what he did, who he was, it ate away at her. She got sick, cancer, and instead of fighting it, it was like, his voice cracked, like she welcomed it, an escape she couldn't ask for but wouldn't refuse. Adrian, I was 8 when she died, old enough to understand, young enough to blame myself. I kept thinking if I'd been better, stronger, maybe she would have wanted to stay. He stared at his coffee cup. My father told me loving people made you weak, that my mother had been weak, and it killed her. I believed him for a long time. Isabella felt tears burn her eyes. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, just... He looked up, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. Understand why this is hard for me. Why every time I let you close, every time I feel something real, part of me is 8 years old again, watching the only person who loved me choose to leave. She didn't choose to leave you, Adrian. She was sick. I know that. Rationally, I know that. But the 8-year-old in me doesn't. His hands clenched around his cup. And that 8-year-old is the one who built all those walls, who decided love was just another word for eventual loss, who swore he'd never care enough to break like my father did. Isabella reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. You're not 8 anymore. No, but I'm still that scared kid sometimes. Then I'll be patient with him too. Adrian's laugh was watery. You're being too understanding. You should be angry, demanding more, telling me to get over it. That's not how this works. How does it work? However we need it to. Isabella squeezed his hand. There's no rule book for this, Adrian. We just figure it out as we go. He turned his hand over, gripped hers tightly. What if I can't give you what you need? What if I'm too damaged? Stop! Just stop! She stood, moved around the table to stand beside him. You keep saying that like it's some terminal diagnosis. Everyone's damaged. Everyone has scars. That doesn't make you unlovable. Adrian pulled her down onto his lap, the gesture surprising them both. His arms came around her, holding tight, and she felt him shaking. I want to believe that, he whispered into her hair. I want to believe I'm not just broken beyond repair. You're not broken. You're hurt. There's a difference. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in the morning light. Isabella could feel Adrian's heart beating against her shoulder, fast and unsteady. Could feel the moment he decided to stop running, at least for now. I need time, he finally said, to figure out how to do this. How to be someone's husband instead of just, I know, take all the time you need. What if it's too much time? What if you get tired of waiting? Then I'll tell you. But Adrian, she pulled back to look at him. I'm not your mother. I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to be perfect for me to stay. Something broke in his expression. He kissed her then, hard and desperate and full of things he couldn't say. Isabella kissed him back, tasting salt. Couldn't tell if it was her tears or his. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to mess this up, he said. Probably. I'm going to run when things get hard. I know. And you're still... He pulled back to look at her. You're still willing to try. I'm already trying. Have been for months. You're just finally joining me. His smile was shaky but real. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway. That doesn't sound so bad anymore. They stayed tangled together until Marie discreetly knocked, reminding Adrian of his 10 o'clock meeting. He groaned, pressed one more kiss to Isabella's temple before reluctantly letting her go. Tonight, he said. Dinner. Here, not out. Just us. Just us? I want... He struggled for the words. I want to try being normal, whatever that means. Cooking together, eating at the kitchen table like regular people. No staff, no formality. Just us. Isabella felt warmth bloom in her chest. I'd like that. I can't promise I'll be good at it. Neither can I. We'll be terrible together. He kissed her one more time, quick and almost shy, before leaving for his meeting. Isabella stood in the dining room, touching her lips, feeling like she'd just witnessed something impossible. Adrian Volkov, the man who'd married her with ice in his veins and walls around his heart, had just asked to cook dinner with her. It was a small thing, But small things she was learning could mean everything. That night, Isabella found Adrian in the kitchen, looking adorably lost in front of the stove. He'd changed into jeans and a t-shirt. She'd never seen him in anything so casual, and was staring at a recipe on his phone like it was written in ancient Greek. "Need help?" she asked, fighting a smile. "I'm beginning to think this was a terrible idea." He gestured at the ingredients spread across the counter. "I can negotiate million-dollar deals. I can't apparently cook pasta." "It's just pasta. How hard can it be?" Famous last words. An hour later, the kitchen looked like a war zone. Flour everywhere, water boiling over, tomato sauce splattered on the backsplash. Isabella was laughing so hard she had tears in her eyes, and Adrian was swearing in 3 different languages at the pasta that had somehow managed to stick to itself in a solid mass. "This is a disaster," he said, but he was almost smiling. "This is perfect," Isabella corrected. "The pasta is inedible." "Okay, yes, but look," she gestured around the destroyed kitchen. "We're doing this together, making a mess together, being terrible at something together. When's the last time you did that with anyone?" Adrian looked around, really looked, and something in his expression softened. "Never. I've never done this." "Then we're making history. Historical terrible pasta." He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so warm it made Isabella's chest ache. "We should probably order takeout." "Probably. But I don't want to." He moved closer, pulled her against him despite the flour covering them both. "I want to stay here, in this disaster we made, with you." Isabella wrapped her arms around his neck. "Then stay. I'm covered in flour. So am I. And tomato sauce. Makes us even." He kissed her, slow and thorough and tasting like disaster and possibility. When they broke apart, Isabella saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "We're ordering Chinese," he said, "and then we're eating it in here, in this destroyed kitchen, like the adults we pretend to be." "Deal." They ended up on the kitchen floor, backs against the cabinets, eating noodles straight from the containers. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. It was the most normal either of them had felt in months. "Tell me something," Adrian said between bites. "Something you've never told anyone." "We did this already." "Do it again." Different answer. Isabella thought about it. "I used to talk to my mother after she died, like full conversations. I'd tell her about my day, ask her advice. My father caught me once and told me to stop living in the past, so I stopped out loud. But I never really stopped." Adrian set down his container, looking at her with something soft in his eyes. "What would you tell her now, if she could hear you?" "That I'm scared. That I'm married to someone I'm falling for who might never fully let me in. That I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." Her voice cracked. "That I wish she was here to tell me what to do." "What do you think she'd say?" "Probably that I'm stronger than I think. That love is always a risk worth taking." Isabella smiled through tears. "That I should stop waiting for permission to be happy and just be happy." Adrian pulled her closer, pressed a kiss to her temple. "She sounds wise." She was, until she wasn't there anymore. "I'm sorry you lost her. I'm sorry you lost yours too." They sat in silence, grief shared between them like a bridge. Two people who'd learned too young that love meant loss, trying to figure out if they were brave enough to love anyway. "Isabella," Adrian said quietly, "I'm falling for you too, and it terrifies me." Her breath caught. "Adrian, I need you to know that, need you to understand. This isn't just me being scared of nothing. I'm falling, and I don't know how to do it without breaking, but He swallowed hard. "I'm trying not to run anymore." Isabella kissed him, tasting tears and hope and Chinese food. "Then don't run. Fall with me. We'll figure out the landing together." "What if we crash?" "Then we crash. But at least we won't be alone." He held her tighter, and Isabella felt something shift between them. Not fixed exactly. Not perfect. But real. Honest. Two broken people deciding that maybe broken together was better than whole apart. They stayed on that kitchen floor until the early hours of the morning, talking about everything and nothing, about childhoods and dreams and all the ways they'd learned to protect themselves from feeling too much. And slowly, carefully, They started to dismantle those protections. Together. The weeks that followed felt like living in a different world. Not perfect. Nothing with Adrian could ever be simple or easy, but real in a way Isabella had stopped believing was possible. He still had bad days. Days when the walls went back up, when he retreated into silence and distance. But now, instead of disappearing for days, he'd find her after a few hours. Sometimes he'd just sit beside her without speaking. Sometimes he'd take her hand and hold it like a lifeline. Sometimes he'd say, "I'm sorry, I'm trying." And Isabella was learning that trying was enough. They fell into new patterns. Adrian started coming to bed in her room most nights, though he always stayed on top of the covers, maintaining that last barrier of control. They'd talk in the darkness until one of them fell asleep. He told her about his work, the parts of it he could share. She told him about the paintings she was working on, the life she was building in the spaces between waiting for him. One night, about a month after their kitchen disaster, Adrian asked, "Do you resent me?" Isabella had been half asleep, his question pulling her back. "For what?" "For trapping you in this, for being—" He paused. "For taking so long to figure out how to be a person." She rolled toward him, found his face in the dim light. "I resent a lot of things about how we started. The arrangement, the lack of choice, the months of silence. But you?" She touched his cheek. "No, I don't resent you." "You should. Probably. But I'm choosing not to." She smiled slightly. "Besides, you're not the only one who needed time. I needed to figure out who I was in all this too." "And have you figured it out?" "I'm getting there. Learning that I don't have to earn love by being small. That I can take up space and still be wanted." She paused. "You're teaching me that, even if you don't realize it." Adrian pulled her closer, tucked her head under his chin. "I want you to take up all the space. Fill every room. I want—" He stopped, started again. "I want to be the kind of man who deserves that. Who deserves you." "You already are." "I'm really not." "Then become him. You've got time." He pressed a kiss to her hair, and Isabella felt his chest rise and fall with something that might have been relief or might have been grief. With Adrian, those emotions often looked the same. The shift happened on a Tuesday. Isabella was in the sunroom working on a new painting. She'd been at it for hours, lost in the flow of color and light, when Adrian appeared in the doorway. She didn't notice him at first, too absorbed in trying to capture the exact shade of gray-blue he'd described that morning at breakfast. The lake at dawn, before the sun really comes up. "That's beautiful," he said, making her jump. She turned, brush still in hand. "You scared me." "Sorry." He moved closer, studying the canvas. "Is that the lake? Your favorite color?" She set down her brush, suddenly self-conscious. "I've been trying to get it right for weeks. It's harder than it looks." Adrian stared at the painting for a long moment. When he finally looked at her, his eyes were bright with something she couldn't name. "You painted my favorite color. I paint a lot of things. But you painted this for me." It wasn't a question, but Isabella answered anyway. "Yes." He crossed to her in 3 strides, pulled her up from her chair, and kissed her like the world was ending. Not the careful kisses they'd been sharing, tentative and testing. This was raw, desperate, full of everything he couldn't say. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian kept his forehead pressed to hers. "Move into my room," he said. Isabella's breath caught. "What? I can't." He pulled back to look at her. "I can't keep doing this halfway. Sleeping next to you, but not with you. Being close, but not close enough. I want you in my bed, in my space. I want to wake up next to you and not feel like I'm stealing something that isn't mine." "Adrian, I know it's fast. I know I don't have the right to ask after months of pushing you away. But I'm asking anyway." His hands framed her face. "Move into my room. Let me try to be your husband for real." Isabella searched his eyes, looking for doubt or fear. She found both, but underneath them was something stronger. Determination, choice, want. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay?" "Yes." "Okay, I'll move into your room." The smile that broke across his face was devastating. He kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. "Tonight? Are you sure you're ready for this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway. That night, Isabella moved her things into Adrian's bedroom. It should have felt momentous, dramatic. Instead, it felt strangely natural, like something that should have happened months ago, finally clicking into place. Adrian helped her hang her clothes in his closet, making space between his suits, put her books on the nightstand next to his, cleared a drawer in his dresser without being asked. Small gestures that meant everything. When they finally climbed into bed, together, under the covers, no barriers between them, Adrian pulled her close and just held her. "Thank you," he said into the darkness. "For what?" "For being patient, for not giving up, for painting my favorite color even though I didn't deserve it." Isabella pressed a kiss to his chest. "You deserve more than you think." "I'm starting to believe that." They fell asleep tangled together, and when Isabella woke in the middle of the night, Adrian was still there, still holding her, still choosing to stay. Progress wasn't linear. There were still hard days, still moments when Adrian pulled back or shut down. But now, instead of retreating to separate corners of the house, they stayed close, worked through it together. One particularly bad day came after a business meeting gone wrong. Adrian came home tense and silent, his walls back up so completely Isabella could practically see them. She found him in his office, staring at nothing. "Talk to me," she said from the doorway. "Not now, Isabella." "Yes, now. You promised you'd try. Trying means talking to me when things are hard." "I said not now." His voice had that edge to it, the one that used to make her retreat. She didn't retreat. Instead, she walked into the office, closed the door behind her. "What happened?" "Business. Nothing you need to worry about. Stop doing that. Stop protecting me from your life like I'm made of glass." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the things I deal with, the kind of people, the kind of decisions. Then help me understand." "I can't." He stood abruptly, moved to the window. "This part of my life, it's not something I can share. It's dark, Isabella, dangerous, and I won't drag you into it." "I'm already in it. I married you. That makes it my life too." "That's different." "How?" "Because I can keep you separate, keep you safe, keep you—" He stopped, his hands clenched, clean, untouched by all of this. Isabella felt something crack open in her understanding. "You think you're protecting me. I am protecting you. By shutting me out? By keeping walls between us even now?" She moved closer. "Adrian, I don't need you to protect me from your life. I need you to let me be part of it. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. Whatever happened today, whatever decision you had to make, tell me." "No." "Why?" "Because you'll look at me differently." The words exploded out of him. "Because you'll see what I really am, what I really do, and you'll—" His voice broke. "You'll stop looking at me like I'm someone worth saving." The pain in his voice nearly broke her. "Adrian, I had to make a call today, a hard one. Someone was stealing from us, had been for months. I had to decide how to handle it." He turned to face her, and his eyes were hollow. "Do you understand? I had to decide what happens to a man who crossed us. And I made that decision, Isabella, without hesitation, without mercy." "What did you decide? Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters. Tell me." Adrian's laugh was bitter. "I handled it. He won't be a problem anymore. And before you ask, no, I didn't—" He stopped. "I'm not a murderer, but I'm not a good man either." Isabella took a breath, processing. "You did what you had to do." "That's it? That's all you're going to say?" "What do you want me to say? That I'm shocked? I knew who you were when I married you, Adrian. I'm not naive." "You should be disgusted. You should—" "I should what? Run away? Condemn you? Look at you with fear instead of love?" She crossed to him, took his face in her hands. "I married into this world knowing what it was. You're not going to scare me away by being honest about it." "Isabella, listen to me. I don't need you to be perfect. I don't need you to be someone you're not. I just need you to stop hiding." She held his gaze. "All those walls you built to keep me safe, they're just keeping you alone. And I'm tired of being on the outside." Adrian stared at her like she was something impossible. "How can you—" He stopped, started again. "How can you look at me and not see a monster?" "Because you're not a monster. You're a man trying to survive in an impossible situation, a man who takes care of his people, who makes hard decisions because someone has to. A man who's been taught that caring makes you weak, but who cares anyway, despite everything. She pressed her forehead to his. That's not a monster, Adrian. That's just human. Something broke in his expression. He pulled her against him, buried his face in her hair, and shook. Not crying, exactly. Something deeper than that. Something fundamental cracking and reforming. I'm so tired, he whispered. Tired of being hard all the time. Tired of pretending I don't feel things. Tired of being alone even when you're right here. Then stop. Stop being alone. Let me in completely, not just the parts you think are acceptable. What if the rest is too dark? Then we'll figure it out together, but Adrian, you have to let me try. You have to trust that I'm strong enough to handle the truth. He held her tighter. I'm afraid. I know, but be afraid with me, not alone. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in his office while the sun set outside. When Adrian finally pulled back, his eyes were red but clear. The man who was stealing, he said quietly. I had him removed from his position, blacklisted from working with any of our associates. His family will struggle, and that's on me. But I didn't, he paused. I didn't handle it the way my father would have. I showed restraint, mercy even, by some standards. That's not nothing. It's not enough either. Maybe it doesn't have to be enough. Maybe it just has to be better than before. Adrian nodded slowly. I want out. The words hung between them, stark and impossible. Out of what? Isabella asked carefully. This life, this business, all of it. He moved to his desk, sat heavily. I've been thinking about it for months. Even before you, before us. I'm tired of being this person, making these decisions. He laughed without humor. I want to be someone you can be proud of. I'm already proud of you. You shouldn't be. Too bad. You don't get to decide that for me. She moved to sit across from him. Tell me about this. About wanting out. It's complicated. The business, the family obligations. You can't just walk away from this life. Not without consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind that could get people hurt. The kind that could put you in danger. His hands clenched on the desk. That's why I can't just... So figure it out. Make a plan. Find a way. Isabella leaned forward. If you really want out, we'll find a way to make it happen. Together. It could take years. Then we have years. Isabella, you don't understand what you're offering. The risk, I understand perfectly. I'm offering to stand beside you while you become the person you want to be. However long that takes. Whatever it costs. Adrian stared at her, and she saw the exact moment he let himself believe it. Let himself hope that maybe, just maybe, he could have something different. Something better. I don't deserve you, he said. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. He came around the desk, pulled her to her feet, and kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. I'm terrified and I don't know what I'm doing and I'll probably mess this up 100 different ways. But I love you, Isabella, and I'm done pretending I don't. Isabella felt tears burn her eyes. I love you too. Even knowing what I am, what I've done, especially knowing, because I know all of you now, not just the parts you thought were acceptable. And I choose you anyway. Adrian kissed her again, harder this time, desperate and grateful and absolutely real. When he lifted her onto his desk, scattering papers, Isabella didn't protest. When his hands found the hem of her shirt, she helped him pull it off. When he paused, his eyes dark with want and something close to fear, she pulled him closer. Are you sure? He asked, his voice rough. I've never been more sure of anything. They made love on his desk, in his office, in the space where he made all his hardest decisions. It was clumsy and intense and nothing like the movies. Adrian kept stopping to check if she was okay, if she wanted this, if he was doing it right. Isabella kept pulling him closer, telling him yes, telling him she loved him, telling him to stop thinking and just feel. Afterward, lying tangled together on the leather couch in his office, both half-dressed and breathing hard, Adrian traced patterns on her skin. He stopped, searching for words. A disaster. I was going to say perfect, but sure. Disaster works too. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. I have no idea what I'm doing. Neither do I. We're terrible at this. Absolutely terrible. Want to do it again? His laugh rumbled through his chest. Give me 10 minutes. They stayed in his office for hours, talking and touching and learning each other in ways they'd been too afraid to before. When they finally made their way to bed sometime after midnight, Adrian pulled her close and whispered, "Thank you." For what? For seeing me. All of me. The good parts and the broken parts and everything in between. For choosing to stay anyway. Isabella kissed his chest, right over his heart. Thank you for letting me. The next few weeks were a revelation. With the walls finally down between them, Adrian became someone Isabella had only glimpsed before. He was funny, with a dry wit that caught her off guard. He was thoughtful, remembering small details about her preferences and surprising her with them. He was passionate about things she'd never expected: architecture, jazz music, obscure historical events. And he was hers, completely, undeniably hers. They still fought, still had moments of misunderstanding and hurt feelings, but they'd learned how to fight toward each other instead of away. Learned that conflict didn't mean abandonment, that anger didn't equal loss. One night, about 2 months after Adrian's confession, Isabella woke to find him sitting up in bed, staring at nothing. Can't sleep? She asked, touching his back. He startled slightly. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I was just... He turned to look at her, and in the dim light his eyes were soft. I was watching you sleep and thinking about how different everything is now. Different how? I used to lie awake afraid of losing things. Now I lie awake grateful for what I have. He touched her face. You changed everything, Isabella. You made me believe I could be someone different, someone better. You did that yourself. I was here when you decided to try. You were more than here. You were relentless, stubborn. You refused to let me hide even when I desperately wanted to. His smile was soft. You saved me, even though I didn't want to be saved. You saved yourself. I just held the door open. Adrian pulled her into his lap, held her close. I've been thinking about the future, about what I want it to look like. And I want out, really out. I've started making moves quietly, shifting assets, building legitimate businesses we can transition to. It'll take time, maybe years, but I'm doing it. For us. Isabella's breath caught. Adrian, I want a life where I don't have to make those kinds of decisions anymore, where I can sleep at night without worrying about who I've hurt or what I've done. He paused. I want to be the kind of man our children would be proud of. The word children hung in the air between them, unexpected and enormous. Children? Isabella whispered. Eventually. Maybe. If you... He looked almost shy. If you want that, with me. I want everything with you. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promises neither of them could quite believe they were making. When they broke apart, Adrian kept her close. I love you, he said, like he was still getting used to the words. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. You're everything I didn't know I needed. I love you too, even when you're difficult, especially when I'm difficult. Definitely especially then. They fell asleep tangled together, talking about futures and possibilities and all the ways their lives might unfold. And for the first time since their wedding night, Isabella felt genuinely, completely happy. The happiness lasted until the following Tuesday, when everything fell apart. Isabella was in the library when Adrian came home early, his face pale and drawn. She knew immediately something was wrong. What happened? She asked, setting down her book. We need to talk. The words sent ice through her veins. Okay. Adrian sat across from her, his hands clenched. There's been a complication with the business. Someone found out about my plans to exit, and He stopped, jaw tight. They're not happy about it. What does that mean? It means I have a choice to make, a hard one. He met her eyes, and she saw fear there, real fear. I can stay in the business, maintain the status quo, keep everyone safe, or I can push forward with exiting and put people I care about at risk. People like me, people like you. Isabella's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. What do you want to do? I want to keep you safe. That's all I want. That's not what I asked. Adrian stood, paced to the window. If I stay, nothing changes. We're safe, but I'm still that person. Making those decisions, living that life. Everything I said about wanting out, wanting to be better, it all goes away. And if you leave, then we're targets. Anyone who wants to hurt me knows the fastest way is through you. His voice cracked. I can't. Isabella, I can't put you in that position. She stood, moved to him. You're not putting me anywhere. I'm choosing to be here. You don't understand what you're choosing. Then explain it to me. Stop protecting me from the truth and just tell me what we're facing. Adrian turned and the look on his face was devastating. If I push forward with leaving, there will be retaliation. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. And when it comes, it won't just be aimed at me. They'll come for you, for anyone I care about. That's how this world works. So we fight back. Isabella, no, listen to me. She took his face in her hands. You told me you wanted out, that you wanted to be someone different. If you give that up now out of fear, you'll resent it. You'll resent this life, this business, and eventually, her voice broke. Eventually, you'll resent me for being the reason you stayed. I could never resent you. You say that now, but in 5 years, 10, when you're still making decisions you hate, living a life you don't want, you'll wonder what if. And that wondering will poison everything. Adrian pulled her hands from his face, held them tight. And if something happens to you, if they hurt you because of my choices, I wouldn't survive that, Isabella. I barely survived losing my mother. I can't. Then we make sure nothing happens. We're smart, we're careful, we build protection, but we don't give up. She searched his eyes. Adrian, I didn't fight this hard to have you, to know you, to love you, just to watch you cage yourself again. Not for me, not for anyone. You're asking me to put you in danger. I'm asking you to trust me, to trust us, to believe that we're strong enough to handle whatever comes. The silence stretched between them, heavy with impossible choices. Isabella watched Adrian struggle, saw the war happening behind his eyes. Fear versus hope. Safety versus freedom. I don't know if I can do it, he finally said. Risk you like that? Then let me risk myself. It's my choice too, Adrian. My life. Let me decide what I'm willing to face. And you're willing to face this? Potential danger, constant uncertainty, a life where we have to look over our shoulders? I'm willing to face anything as long as we face it together. Adrian closed his eyes, and Isabella saw a tear slip down his cheek. I'm so afraid of losing you. I know. But fear can't be the thing that decides our lives. Not anymore. He opened his eyes, looked at her with something raw and broken and incredibly brave. If we do this, if we really do this, there's no going back. Once we start pulling away from the business, we're committed. Whatever consequences come, we face them. Together. Together, he echoed, and it sounded like a vow. They stood wrapped around each other in the library, making the choice that would define the rest of their lives. Not the safe choice, not the easy one, but the right one. The one that meant freedom, eventually. The one that meant risk, certainly. The one that meant choosing love over fear, possibility over safety. The one that meant finally, truly being partners in every sense of the word. Okay, Adrian said finally. We do it. We move forward with the exit plan, but we do it smart, we do it careful, and we do it together. Together, Isabella agreed. He kissed her then, hard and desperate and full of every emotion he couldn't name. When they broke apart, both knew their lives had just changed irrevocably, but they also knew they wouldn't face whatever came alone. And somehow, that made all the difference. The first 3 months of their plan were the hardest Isabella had ever lived through. Adrian worked 16-hour days, carefully dismantling connections and rebuilding legitimate ones. He met with lawyers, accountants, business consultants, people who specialized in helping men like him transition away from the shadows. Isabella watched him come home exhausted, night after night, his shoulders heavy with the weight of decisions that could cost them everything. She tried to help where she could. Learned the basics of the legitimate businesses he was building. Sat in on meetings when he needed someone he trusted beside him. Learned to read the tension in his body, to know when to push and when to simply hold him. They didn't talk about the danger directly. It sat between them like a third presence in every room, unspoken but impossible to ignore. Adrian hired security, discreet but constant. Isabella learned to check over her shoulder, to vary her routes, to never be truly alone. It should have been terrifying. Some days it was. But mostly, it just felt like the price of freedom. The confrontation came on a Friday evening in early spring. Adrian had been in his meeting all day with associates who were less than pleased about his plans. Isabella had stayed home, working on a painting she couldn't seem to get right. The colors were wrong, the composition off. Everything felt wrong. When Adrian came through the door at 9 p.m., she knew immediately something had broken. "Tell me," she said, setting down her brush. He looked at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he crossed to the bar, poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, and drank half of it in one swallow. "They made their position clear," he said finally. "Either I stay or they make life very difficult for everyone involved." Isabella's stomach dropped. Define difficult. They didn't get specific. They didn't have to. He finished the scotch, poured another. The implication was enough. "So what do we do?" "We." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Isabella, this isn't your fight." "Like hell it isn't. We decided this together, remember? We're partners." Partners don't ask each other to walk into a war zone. Partners don't make decisions alone either. She moved closer, took the glass from his hand. "Talk to me. What are you thinking?" Adrian's jaw worked. "I'm thinking I was an idiot to believe I could just walk away, that I put you in danger for a fantasy that was never going to work. That's fear talking. No, that's reality." He pulled away from her, paced to the window. "I can't protect you from these people, Isabella. They have reach, resources, no moral boundaries. If they decide you're a liability or leverage, then we fight back. With what? Good intentions? Love?" His voice was harsh. "This isn't a fairy tale. Love doesn't actually conquer all. Sometimes love just gets people killed." The words hung in the air, brutal and terrifying. Isabella felt something cold settle in her chest. "Is that what you really think?" she asked quietly. "I think I was selfish. I think I let myself believe I could have both you and freedom, when the truth is I can only protect one. And I choose you, Isabella. I'll always choose you, even if it means giving up everything you want to become. Especially then." Isabella stared at him, seeing the defeat in every line of his body. This was it, the moment where Adrian's fear finally won, where he chose safety over possibility, where he locked himself back in the cage he'd worked so hard to escape, and she couldn't let it happen. "No," she said. Adrian turned. "What?" "No, I don't accept that. I don't accept you giving up because you're scared." "Isabella, you told me once that your biggest fear was losing me. Well, my biggest fear is watching you destroy yourself trying to keep me safe." She moved toward him. "If you go back to that life, if you give up everything we've been working toward, I'll lose you anyway. Maybe not physically, but the man I love, the one who wants to be better, do better, he'll be gone. Better that than you being in danger. That's not your choice to make alone." Her voice rose. "You don't get to martyr yourself for my safety without asking me what I want. And what I want is for you to keep fighting, keep moving forward, keep becoming the man you want to be. Even if it puts you at risk? Yes. Even then." Adrian's hands clenched. "You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to trust me, to trust us, to believe that we're strong enough to handle whatever comes." She took his face in her hands. "I'm not your mother, Adrian. I'm not fragile. I'm not going to break. And I'm sure as hell not going to let you sacrifice yourself because you're afraid of history repeating itself." Something cracked in his expression. "What if I can't keep you safe? Then we'll deal with it together. But at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have chosen the life we want instead of the one fear chose for us." "I'm so afraid," he whispered. "Every day I'm afraid something's going to happen to you, and it'll be my fault, and I won't survive it, Isabella. I won't." "Then we make sure nothing happens. We're smart, we're careful, we have resources, but we don't give up." She pressed her forehead to his. "Please don't give up." Not when we're so close. Adrian's hands came up to cover hers, holding them against his face. What if I lose you? What if you don't? What if we actually win this? What if we get everything we've been fighting for? That feels impossible. Most good things do. They stood like that for a long time, foreheads pressed together, breathing in sync. Isabella could feel the war happening inside him, feel the exact moment the balance started to tip. If we do this, he said finally, if we keep going, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If it gets too dangerous, if things escalate beyond what we can handle, you leave. You get somewhere safe and you don't look back. Adrian, promise me, please. It's the only way I can do this, knowing that if everything falls apart, you'll survive it. Isabella wanted to argue, wanted to say she'd never leave him, never abandon him, never run, but she saw the desperation in his eyes, understood that he needed this promise like oxygen. Okay, she said quietly. If it gets that bad, I'll go somewhere safe, but you're coming with me. We leave together or not at all. Isabella, that's my condition. Take it or leave it. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're stubborn. You love it. I really do. He pulled her against him, held her so tight she could barely breathe. Okay, we do this together, but the second I think you're in real danger, we'll deal with it then. Together. He kissed her, hard and desperate, and full of everything he couldn't say. When they broke apart, both knew they'd just committed to something that could destroy them. But they'd also committed to each other. And somehow, that made the fear bearable. The next 6 months were a careful dance of progress and setbacks. Adrian continued dismantling his old life piece by piece, while Isabella learned to live with constant low-level anxiety. They hired better security, brought in consultants who specialized in protection, built contingencies for every worst-case scenario they could imagine. And slowly, impossibly, it started to work. One by one, Adrian's legitimate businesses began to thrive. Real estate development, investment consulting, tech startups. He had a mind for business that translated beautifully when he wasn't operating in the shadows. His old associates pushed back, threatened, postured, but Adrian had been building leverage of his own, documentation and connections that made him more dangerous to hurt than to let go. It wasn't clean, it wasn't easy. There were close calls, moments of genuine danger that left both of them shaken. A break-in at one of Adrian's offices, threatening messages left on Isabella's car. A week where they basically lived in a safe house while Adrian's security team dealt with a credible threat. But they survived. Together. The breakthrough came almost exactly a year after they'd started. Adrian's biggest obstacle, a man named Viktor Kozlov, who'd been his father's oldest associate, finally agreed to a meeting. Isabella wanted to go with him, but Adrian refused. This is my mess to clean up, he said, checking his watch for the third time. I need to handle it. I hate when you go to these meetings alone. I know. But Victor's old school. He won't talk honestly if you're there, and I need him to talk. Adrian pulled her close, pressed a kiss to her forehead. I'll be fine. Security's in place, I've got backup, and I'll call you the second it's over. Promise? Promise. He left, and Isabella spent the next 3 hours unable to sit still. She painted badly, read the same page of her book 6 times, wore a path in the carpet pacing. When her phone finally rang, she grabbed it so fast she nearly dropped it. I'm okay, Adrian said before she could speak. It's over. Over how? Come home. I'll explain everything. When Adrian walked through the door an hour later, he looked different, lighter somehow, like he'd put down a weight he'd been carrying for decades. What happened? Isabella demanded. Victor agreed to let me go, completely. No more obligations, no more ties. I'm out, Isabella. Really out. She stared at him, afraid to believe it. Just like that? Not just like that, we talked for hours. I showed him the businesses I've built, the legitimacy I've created. Explained that I wasn't trying to expose anyone or cause problems. I just wanted a different life. Adrian moved closer, took her hands. And then I told him about you, about us, about wanting to build something that didn't require looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. And that worked? Victor's wife died last year, cancer. He's been thinking about his own legacy, his own choices. I think Adrian paused. I think he saw something of himself in me, what he might have wanted if he'd been brave enough to try. Isabella felt tears burn her eyes. So we're really free? We're really free. He pulled her against him, buried his face in her hair. It's over, Isabella. The threats, the danger, all of it. We can actually live now. Build the life we want without fear. She held him tight, feeling the truth of it sink in. They'd done it. Against all odds, against every reasonable expectation, they'd actually done it. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. I couldn't have done it without you, wouldn't have tried. He pulled back to look at her. You saved me, Isabella, from myself, from my fear, from a life that would have eventually destroyed me. You saw something in me worth saving, and you refused to give up until I saw it too. You saved yourself. I just held the door open. Same thing. They stood wrapped around each other in the foyer of their home, both crying now, both overwhelmed by the enormity of what they'd accomplished. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever would be. But it was theirs, built on choice and courage, and the stubborn refusal to let fear win. 3 months later, Adrian made the announcement official. He was stepping away from all family business interests, focusing entirely on his legitimate enterprises. The news sent ripples through certain circles, but by then, he'd built enough goodwill and leverage that most people just shrugged and moved on. Isabella watched him transform over those months. The tension that had lived in his shoulders for as long as she'd known him gradually eased. He laughed more, smiled easier, slept through the night without waking in a cold sweat. He was becoming someone she barely recognized, someone whole, someone at peace. One evening, about 6 months after their freedom, Adrian came home with a box under his arm and a nervous energy she couldn't place. What's that? She asked. Something I should have done a long time ago. He set the box on the coffee table, pulled out a stack of leather-bound books, his mother's poetry collection. I'm ready. To read them, I mean. With you, if you want to. Isabella felt her throat tighten. Of course I want to. They spent that evening on the couch, Adrian's head in her lap, while she read Whitman aloud. His voice joined hers on the familiar passages, the ones his mother had read to him as a child. When he cried, she held him. When he laughed at a memory, she listened. When he fell asleep, exhausted by the emotional weight of it, she kept reading, her hand gentle in his hair. This, she thought, was what healing looked like. Not perfect, not linear, but real. Two broken people learning that broken together was better than whole apart. The proposal happened on a Tuesday morning, which was so perfectly Adrian that Isabella almost laughed. They were having breakfast, their ritual, still maintained after all these months, when he set down his coffee with unusual precision. Marry me, he said. Isabella blinked. I'm already married to you. I know. But that was... He struggled for words. That was a business arrangement, a contract. I want to do it again, properly, for the right reasons. Adrian, I want to stand in front of people who matter and tell them I choose you, not because our families arranged it, not because we had to, but because I want to, because you're... His voice cracked. Because you're everything. And I want the world to know it. Isabella felt tears streaming down her face. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Is that a yes? Of course it's a yes, you idiot. He pulled a ring from his pocket. Not the massive diamond from their first wedding, but something simpler. A sapphire the exact color of the lake at dawn. Her favorite shade. The one she'd painted for him. The one that meant everything. I had it made, he said, sliding it onto her finger beside her wedding band. Thought you deserved something you actually chose. Isabella launched herself at him, knocked him back in his chair, kissed him until they were both breathless and laughing. When they finally broke apart, both grinning like fools, Adrian touched her face with infinite gentleness. I love you, he said. I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. You already do, every day. Then I'll spend the rest of my life doing it better. The second wedding was nothing like the first. Small, intimate, just the people who actually mattered. Marie cried through the entire ceremony. Marco attended. He and Adrian had reached a careful peace, bonded over their mutual care for Isabella. A few of Adrian's legitimate business associates came. along with Isabella's family, who seemed genuinely shocked by the transformation in Adrian. But the biggest difference was in the vows. Adrian stood before her in a simple suit, no pretense, no performance. Just a man looking at the woman he loved like she was his entire world. "Isabella," he said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. "The first time I married you, I was a coward. I gave you rules and distance and everything except the one thing you deserved, me. My whole self, not just the acceptable parts." He took her hands. "You could have left, should have left, but instead you stayed. You fought for us when I was too afraid to fight for myself. You saw something in me worth saving, and you refused to give up until I saw it too." His voice cracked. "You taught me that love isn't weakness, that being vulnerable isn't the same as being destroyed, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone in, completely, and trust they won't destroy what they find there." He squeezed her hands. "I spent my whole life building walls to keep people out. You didn't tear them down, you taught me I didn't need them, that I could be safe and still be open, protected and still be loved." Tears were streaming down Isabella's face now, Adrian's too. "So today, I'm not marrying you because I have to. I'm marrying you because I choose to. Because every day for the rest of my life, I want to wake up and choose you again. Choose us. Choose the messy, complicated, beautiful thing we've built together." He smiled through his tears. "Thank you for being patient. Thank you for being stubborn. Thank you for loving me before I knew how to love you back." There wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering. When it was Isabella's turn, she had to take a moment to compose herself. "Adrian," she finally said, "when we first got married, I thought I was trapped. Sold off to secure an alliance, condemned to a life of loneliness in a beautiful prison. I was so angry at my family, at you, at the universe for putting me in that situation." She smiled slightly, "But I wasn't angry enough to give up. I don't know why. Stubbornness, maybe. Pride. Or maybe some part of me saw what you couldn't see in yourself, that underneath all that ice was someone worth knowing, someone worth fighting for." Pan I antiso. She took a shaky breath. "You kept telling me you were broken, damaged beyond repair. But Adrian, everyone's broken, everyone's damaged. That's not what makes you special. What makes you special is that you let me see it. You let me in, even when every instinct was screaming at you to run. You chose to be brave when being safe would have been so much easier." Her voice strengthened. "You think I saved you, but you saved me too. You taught me that love isn't about being small, about earning affection by taking up less space. You taught me that I could be whole and still be loved, that my needs mattered, that partnership meant choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." She squeezed his hands. "So today, I'm choosing you. The you who's afraid but tries anyway. The you who's learning how to be vulnerable. The you who burns pasta and holds me when I cry and is becoming, every day, the man you want to be." She smiled through her tears. "Thank you for letting me love you. Thank you for loving me back. Thank you for proving that sometimes the best things come from the worst beginnings." When the officiant pronounced them married, again, Adrian kissed her like it was the first time, like they hadn't been married for over a year already, like he was claiming her, finally, for real. The reception was joy incarnate. Adrian gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying. Isabella danced with her father, who whispered that he was sorry for forcing this marriage, but grateful for how it had turned out. Marie got tipsy on champagne and told embarrassing stories about Adrian as a child. But the best moment came late in the evening, when Adrian pulled Isabella onto the balcony for a quiet moment alone. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Deliriously. She leaned back against him. "You?" "I didn't know it was possible to feel this much and not explode from it," Isabella laughed. "That's very romantic." "I'm working on it." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I have something for you, a wedding gift." "Adrian, you've already given me enough." "Not this." He pulled a folder from inside his jacket. "I've been working on something, a foundation, for kids who've lost parents, who are growing up in difficult circumstances. I want to fund education, therapy, support systems, everything I didn't have when my mother died." Isabella turned in his arms, staring at him. "Adrian, I want to name it after her, the Elena Volkov Foundation. Turn all that pain, all those years of grief, into something that actually helps people." His eyes were bright. "I want her legacy to be more than what it was. I want it to mean something. Isabella threw her arms around his neck. That's perfect. She would have loved it. I hope so. He held her tight. I never got to say goodbye to her properly. Never got to thank her for the good parts, the love she gave me before she was gone. This feels like a way to honor that, to make something beautiful out of all that hurt. It is beautiful. You're beautiful. I'm really not. You are to me. They stood wrapped around each other on the balcony, the sounds of celebration drifting out from inside. Below them, the lake stretched out in darkness, calm and endless. Above them, stars were just beginning to appear. Thank you, Adrian said quietly. For what? For not giving up on me. For seeing who I could be before I could see it myself. For loving me through the fear and the walls and all the ways I tried to push you away. He pulled back to look at her. I wouldn't be here without you. Wouldn't be this person. You gave me permission to become someone I didn't know I could be. You did the work. I just cheered you on. Same thing. Isabella smiled, touched his face. I love you. The you from our first wedding, who was so scared he could barely function. The you from those awful first months, who was trying so hard to feel nothing. The you who sat by my bedside when I was sick. The you who kissed me in the library. The you standing here right now. She kissed him softly. All of you. Every version. Even the messy ones. Especially the messy ones. Definitely especially those. He kissed her again, deeper this time, full of promise and possibility and everything they'd fought so hard to build. When they broke apart, both were smiling. Come on, Isabella said, taking his hand. We're missing our own party. Let them wait. I want to stay here, with you, just for a minute. So they stood together on the balcony, hands joined, watching the stars emerge one by one. Two people who'd started as strangers, forced together by obligation and family politics. Two people who'd fought through fear and pain and the weight of their own broken histories to find something real, something worth fighting for, something like love. 2 years later, Isabella sat in the nursery she and Adrian had spent months preparing, their daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. Elena, named for the grandmother she'd never meet, but whose legacy lived on in so many ways. Adrian appeared in the doorway, still in his suit from the foundation board meeting. When he saw them, his whole face softened. Hey, he whispered, moving to sit beside her. How is she? Perfect. Terrible. Both. Isabella smiled tiredly. She refused to sleep for 3 hours, then passed out mid-cry like someone flipped a switch. Sounds familiar. He touched his daughter's tiny hand with infinite gentleness. Think she'll be stubborn like her mother? Absolutely. We'll be in so much trouble. Adrian laughed quietly. Can't wait. He wrapped his arm around Isabella's shoulders, and they sat together in the dim light of the nursery, watching their daughter sleep. Outside, the city hummed with life. The foundation was thriving, helping hundreds of kids every year. Adrian's businesses were successful beyond anyone's expectations. They'd bought a house on the lake, smaller than the mansion they'd started in, but full of light and warmth and space for the family they were building. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. They still fought sometimes, still had moments of misunderstanding and hurt. Adrian still struggled with fear occasionally, with the old patterns of shutting down when things got hard. Isabella still pushed too hard sometimes, demanded too much, forgot that healing wasn't linear. But they'd learned how to fight toward each other instead of away. Learned that conflict didn't mean the end, that anger didn't equal abandonment. Learned that love wasn't about being perfect. It was about choosing each other, every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. What are you thinking about? Adrian asked softly. How far we've come. How different everything is now. Better different? So much better. She leaned into him. Sometimes I think about that first night. How alone I felt. How certain I was that I'd made a terrible mistake. You had made a terrible mistake. You married me. Best mistake I ever made. Adrian kissed her temple. I used to think love was weakness. That caring about someone gave them power to destroy you. That the smart thing, the safe thing, was to feel nothing. His voice was quiet, reflective. I was so wrong. Love isn't what destroys you. Fear is. The fear of being hurt, of being left, of being not enough. That's what eats you alive. Love is what saves you from that fear. When did you get so wise? I married a woman who refused to let me hide. She taught me everything I know. Isabella shifted Elena to her other arm, felt Adrian adjust to help support the weight. This, she thought, this easy partnership, this unspoken communication, this choice to be together in every small moment, this was what marriage actually was. Not the wedding, not the vows, not the big dramatic gestures. Just this. Choosing each other over and over in 1,000 tiny ways every day. I love you, she said. Simple words, but weighted with everything they'd survived to get here. I love you too. Adrian touched Elena's head, his hand so large against her tiny skull. Both of you. More than I knew it was possible to love anything. Not scared anymore? Terrified, every day. He smiled, but doing it anyway. That, Isabella thought, was the real lesson. Not that love conquered fear. Love didn't make you less afraid. It just made the fear worth facing. It gave you something to be brave for. She'd married a man who couldn't love her, and through patience and stubbornness and sheer force of will, they'd built something neither of them had believed was possible. They'd taken a marriage born from obligation and transformed it into a partnership built on choice. They'd proven that beginnings didn't dictate endings, that broken people could heal together, that sometimes the best things came from the worst circumstances. Adrian had learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that being open didn't mean being destroyed, that he could love completely and still survive if that love was lost. And Isabella had learned that she didn't need to be small to be loved, that her needs mattered, that partnership meant standing beside someone as an equal, not beneath them as an accessory. Together, they'd learned that real strength wasn't control. It was trust. That true courage wasn't never being afraid. It was being afraid and choosing love anyway. In the end, their story wasn't about a cold marriage that became warm or a cruel man who became kind. It was about two people who'd been taught that love meant loss, that caring meant weakness, that safety required distance. Two people who'd decided, against every lesson they'd learned, to try anyway. To risk everything for the possibility of something real. To choose love over fear again and again until the choosing became second nature. Elena stirred in Isabella's arms, made a small sound of complaint. Adrian immediately reached out, his hands ready to help, to support, to share the burden. Isabella met his eyes and smiled. This was their happy ending, not because everything was perfect, but because they'd fought to make it real. Not because they'd magically fixed each other, but because they'd learned to be broken together. Not because love had solved all their problems, but because they'd decided their love was worth whatever problems it created. Adrian had been right all those months ago in the library. This was falling, terrifying, exhilarating, impossible to control. But they weren't crashing, they were flying, together. And that made all the difference.